If you're a brand looking for serious growth opportunities, then chances are you've been looking at China's dynamic consumer market. Never before has there been a market that has offered so much opportunity. 1.3 billion people, a huge, rapidly increasing middle class, and e-commerce sales figures so massive that it almost sounds as if you're making them up. While opportunities are great, so are the challenges. If you're entering China thinking that the same strategies that have worked brilliantly in other markets can simply be rolled out in China, you might be in for a rude awakening. This vast digital-first market is fast-moving and constantly changing. To succeed in China, brands need to start from scratch and learn to do things the China way. I'm Jane Singer, and welcome to A Seat at the Table. Each week I sit down with industry leaders, entrepreneurs, educators, and authors who share their expertise, insights, and visions for the future. To better understand how to succeed in China's complex e-commerce market, I reached out to Josh Gardner, CEO and co-founder of Shanghai-based Kung Fu Data. Josh is a senior China strategist who's helped hundreds of brands with China e-commerce launches. His company manages a portfolio of successful flagship stores on Tmall and JD.com and works with clients from strategy and structure to activation and optimization. Before we get started, if you're looking to develop knitwear collections that will be bestsellers both online and offline, then Spin Expo is the place to go. It's the primary exhibition for yarn and knitwear. The fair offers a carefully curated selection of high-quality yarns and knitwear that's bursting with creativity, not to mention outstanding trend information that cannot be found anywhere else. You can learn more at www.spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. There's also a link in the show notes. And I'm pleased to share that A Seat at the Table now has its own website. You can find all of the podcast episodes, the show notes, and lots of other useful information there. You can find it at www.seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. FM because it's a podcast. Now, let's sit down with Josh and find out how to succeed in China's complex e-commerce market. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. I'm really excited to be able to sit down and talk with you. There's so much interest in the China market these days. It's one of the biggest and fastest growing in the world, and many of the brands and retailers that listen to this podcast certainly, and not just luxury, are looking to enter the market. But it's a bit daunting because even some of the most experienced brands have failed. So I wanted to reach out to you, and you have such a deep understanding of the China consumer market. So I thought it'd be really interesting to get your take on what's happening there and to understand what it takes nowadays to navigate this market, because certainly it's becoming a lot more complex than it was in the old days.
Yeah, I think China's like a big topic, right? I mean, and it's also not one uniform place. I mean, it's a place where there's 1.3 billion people, right? And it's huge. And even a small category in China, like a small segment, can be much bigger than the global segment of that category because there's just so much consumption at scale. And so I think the issue with China, as opposed to the old days, as you mentioned them, versus the new days, is that China in many ways has grown past, exceeded, or invented entirely new ways of doing business and retail, and is really now ahead of the West. So when Western brands first came into China, China looked very backwards to them. But I would say it is the exact opposite now, because we interface with so many brands. We have more than 20 stores on Tmall and JD, China's two biggest marketplace malls. And we run 15 brands, and we encounter so many brands throughout the year. And I'm amazed at, how much more intensity goes into sort of an effort in China at, online retail or even any other channel, how much more complicated and sophisticated and operationally intense things are in the market. And, that's really just a function of competition and evolution, right? And I think it's time that, China gets recognized. I mean, there are literally like 500 million people that are middle class by any Western standard, and who have the purchasing power that exceeds the equivalent in the West because, a lot of Chinese don't have debt. Some do, but a lot of them do not. And they have significant savings. They're not completely upside down on their obligations. This wouldn't be true of some of the younger generation, that's for sure. But Gen X, maybe the early Gen Y, equivalents in China are actually, and even older generations are actually quite solvent. They're liquid, they're pretty much debt free, and if they do have debt, it's usually investment debt. It's not personal, and so they have more consumption power and a little bit lower obligations. So in terms of the ability to grow commerce, I think it's a great place. The second component there with that population that's interesting is, whereas in the West, the equivalent spirit or sort of zeitgeist of the consumer in America in post-war, so after World War II, the baby boom generation, you kind of have the same feeling in China now. So consumers in China are looking for, they're I don't want to use the word ambitious, but they are confident. A lot of the younger generation has grown up only seeing China grow and prosper and the quality of life just continuously improve. So they just have a lot more confidence in spending. They haven't seen big downturns. None of them are crushed by, as I mentioned, different types of debts or obligations that you would see in the West. And now that is changing, obviously, in the younger generation, but the ones that still hold that, let's call them the asset class, right?
Right.
So the people that have assets are not sitting pretty, but I would certainly say on a parity basis, doing much better than their Western equivalents, and certainly from the standpoint of disposable income. So it's an interesting environment. The negative side of it is that it is extremely loud and crowded. So the marketplaces are incredibly operationally intense and hyper competitive. And to put that in perspective, Taobao, which is the world's largest online marketplace and probably the biggest monopoly hiding in plain sight on this earth, includes Tmall, right? Like Tmall is simply a button inside Taobao, right? It's just one channel within this mega marketplace. And there are many like this, right, in China, these big marketplaces. And there are literally 60 million active merchants on Taobao.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah, and think about from a population standpoint, that's like the population of the UK.
Right.
It's double the population of Canada, right?
Wow.
Or Australia, and literally just merchants on Taobao with active
Oh my gosh.
And let's say for retailers, so that they can get an idea, about 10 million of them, maybe even 15, make the stuff they sell. They're factories.
Oh my gosh, right. That's a very, very good point. Yeah, very interesting.
So Taobao has pioneered, or Alibaba's pioneered, manufacturer to consumer direct commerce, M2C.
Right.
So everything in China is literally either factory direct or brand direct, or consumers don't buy it.
Right.
Because they buy directly from the factory. So why would I go through a third-party retailer or middleman of any kind when I can buy either A, directly from the brand, B, a trader who represents the brand, or C, a factory who will make the same thing for less, direct. So it's a weird place to operate because I think a lot of the sort of competitive advantages or where brand building happens overseas is no longer relevant in China. So, for example, your competitive advantage is your economies of scale and your logistics efficiency. Well, that comes out of the box for anyone operating on any platform in China. The platforms give you all the logistics and commercial infrastructure for free, right? And the data.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to pay for anything. It's all given to you. And so it becomes this gladiator battle for real estate. Screen real estate, and that really is the game. It's sort of the mind share and in terms of screen real estate that you get as a brand and as a retailer in China, that dictates your outcome. So when you say even the most successful brands have failed in China, I wouldn't say they failed. I would say their teams have failed, because those brands are probably very successful in China still. They just don't control their own trade in China. It's controlled by other people who are very clever, right? But those brands could, with the right infrastructure, set up partnerships, outsourced infrastructure or teams and resources, take control of their destiny in China and actually do quite well. Now, some of those kinds of retailers are working in a model that is broken. So you can't really have a multi-brand business in China unless you have a very, very good reason. So I think if someone's coming into the market, it's very simple. If you talk to any venture capitalist, you talk to a PE fund, you talk to anyone who has money invested in things in China, if you go to them with anything less than an unfair advantage, they kick you out of their office. Right? So you have to have this. And that unfair advantage needs to be defendable. So if you can't have a defendable position and an unfair advantage of some kind, you really have no place in China. Like I said, it's ridiculously competitive. And that competition is driving the changes and that you're talking about. The reason there's friction between Western brands and the marketplace. They're having a tough time using their sort of global, monolithic sort of architecture in China, where that model is already disrupted. So pick any multi-brand retailer like ASOS or anyone that's come in the market, they just get broken immediately by the way things are in China. And it's not that China's doing it to them intentionally, it's that their model is outdated. It's like going in to China with typewriters and everyone's on mobile devices, right? It just, that model isn't, you guys have to change, if you want to succeed.
Yeah, right model, wrong market. But I mean, you had said you have to have a very defensible position. So for example, what might you see as a brand that has a defensible position?
So defendable position is really you own all the IP on your brand or on your business, right? Like that, there's a clear ownership path that goes all the way into the domestic registrations in China. So as an example, a negative. So we have a client who will remain nameless on this particular podcast.
Okay.
Frustrating my team for 2.5 years. Now, they are the original inventor of this product line and this category in the world. Okay. So if you knew who it was, you would know exactly what it is. Okay. But they found, and this is where everything breaks down in China. They found a partner for the market that makes stuff for them, makes their products. And so they think, oh, you can do retail in China for us. I mean, that's like hiring a farmer to run a shipping, conglomerate. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's an age-old problem. Yeah.
It's a great factory, and they make great stuff. But they don't know how to do retail. They don't understand digital commerce or anything like that. Don't hire someone who's not in the market to register the IP. So the brand registers words in English and Chinese with the Chinese government, and they're granted those trademarks.
Right.
Here's the problem. They didn't bother to look up in Chinese what Chinese people called the brand. So they registered stuff that isn't relevant. And someone else, a clever squatter, but really a clever distributor or reseller of the brand, knew what the characters were and registered them legally. And so this, and it can't be taken back because you were granted rights on your name. You given what you were asked for, so anything else is free game, right? And it's not something like Starbucks, which is a very clear name. I mean, the way Chinese people describe this brand in Chinese is a generic sort of phrase.
Right. Yes. That's often the case. Yeah.
And so a Chinese company, so the Chinese company registered it, and they now have a perpetual right in the market to all the valuable traffic and transactions on the brand.
Oh my God.
And by the way, there's a very famous American, I'll even tell you, it's a handbag brand that was very unsuccessful in China the first time they entered for this reason. They didn't have control of their supply chain. So they basically allowed all their closeout dealers like Marshalls and other people in the States who had access to their off-season and in-season inventory that was marked down inventory. Those dealers were big.
Yes.
And they had a commanding huge amount of money running through these dealers in the States. It's big money. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And so the brands, continued to sell. those guys did a deal with this guy in Beijing who set up an unbelievable gray trade on this particular brand. And he's done it on like 10 or 20 other brands. He is one of the most powerful brand squatters I've ever seen.
Wow.
And he's not selling counterfeit. It's legal tender.
Wow.
And he's done such a good job, right? Because he can get a dominant position on trade. And that handbag brand had $100 million US business cross-border and domestic in China, and this guy had 70 million of it.
Oh my gosh.
The brand itself had like 10.
Ouch.
This guy was doing 70 million.
Wow.
And they tried to sue him, failed. Tried to sue him, failed. Couldn't get control. So like when I mean defendable position, I mean this specifically.
Right,
Do you own your property in China? Do you have a way, like if you don't have exclusivity, a better way to describe it would be scarcity and exclusivity.
Okay, yeah.
Is it possible for a clever Chinese trader to get a hold of your inventory at a price lower than you can sell it? If the answer is yes, you are potentially going to have problems with channel conflict in China. And that conflict could erode your ability to make money. So there's two sides. Success in China is what? Volume is there, but if you don't have margin, then it becomes meaningless.
Right.
The issue with defense is if you can't defend your position, which means you can't defend your ownership of brand trade, right? If you can't control it, then you're going to lose money. You will not make margin in the market. And that's where people really start complaining because there's all this friction in the market. And it's not about counterfeit in most cases. Let's take beauty products. There's no counterfeit issue. The issue is you don't have a position. So there's a retailer from the UK that is multi-brand. They, about 4 or 5 years ago when they launched, they were doing very well, about 20 million pounds cross-border into China with 400 or so boutique-y, sort of independent beauty brands. Well, Tmall Global really evolved, right? And their BD team went out and started knocking on doors for the brand owners. And so the brands themselves can just launch Tmall Global stores, right? And go direct. And so what ended up happening is you had a direct brand to consumer happening. You also had these brands selling to anyone and their uncle who was coming with cash to buy inventory.
Right.
And so what happened was this retailer, which was very successful, has had all of its margin and all of its position eroded over the last 4 years. And that is not what you want to do. So you have to be able to defend the income or the cash flows that you're going to earn in China. And there's many ways to do it, but you start with legal ownership of IP. You look at exclusivity around product, collections, technology, commodities. So I have a client who launched a new brand, didn't exist a year ago. This guy used to work at Alibaba. He was a category manager, a big one. He left and he found out that in Eastern Europe and Western Russia, there is a batch of commodities that are grown in the food segment. So it's all different kinds of purees of fruits and things. And he created a brand for children. He can charge, to give you an idea of how defendable his position, the Chinese equivalent brand and foreign brands sell for literally an average of, I think it's 2.8 times what he sells. So if he retails for 6 RMB, they sell for 20 or 23.
Wow.
And he has an absolutely defendable position around his price, quality, origin source commodity. And of course, the brand itself is growing fast because he's got a defendable position on the commodity. So he's got the quality, he's got the pricing, and he's unbeatable. And so you just have to think this way. What is your unfair advantage? So if you've got something that no one else has, or you can defend something that everyone else wants, either way, you build a fortress around it, you come in the market, and you grow the brand as much as you can. So one of the best ways to build a defendable position if you don't have sort of control of a commodity or special IP or product or something is really just brand equity. And that's the most important thing, is durable brand equity. A defendable position to me would mean you don't just build a brand, you can defend it. So that's what's durable about it. Right? It's going to last a long time. Make sense?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And I think that these are things that people overlook, and like you said, they shouldn't. At this point in the journey of trading, with China or with other international countries, people should know better than to not properly register a trademark, right?
Exactly. But you'd be surprised how few people do this.
I am always surprised, Josh. I am always surprised because that's sort of something that has been talked about for a long time. But you're right, most people don't do that.
I mean, I can't give you names, but I work with some people that, the bigger group that owns them, obviously they don't make these mistakes. They're a Fortune 5. They've been in China for 30 years. But when they buy brands, right, to take in-house, they bought a brand from the States in beauty and skincare, you would know it instantly. Same situation I told you before with the squatter.
Wow.
They hired a name strategy firm in New York and a law firm that didn't bother to go on to even Taobao or a social channel in China and look up how people look up the brand.
Oh my
They came up with some great name for the brand, thinking there was, the brand wasn't doing anything in China. And so they came up with this whole new strategy, went, registered all this IP. Government gave it to them right away. Guess what? It's worthless.
Right?
It's absolutely worthless. There's some guy with 100 million RMB cross-border business legally forever sitting on the right trademark. So I can't overemphasize this. You got to own this stuff. And it's amazing how expedient trading decisions are at companies, exporters. So when a brand is looking at China and they're thinking export, they're putting it through their international department, their wholesale department. They really don't care. They may not think about trademark registration because they make the commodity. So they don't care if, someone's messing around, they just want the money.
Yeah, that's true.
And I see that a lot where they build their brand through wholesale and trade and then later decide to go clean it up. But you can't look that way. To me, it's the opposite. You go and get all your stuff registered. Even if you don't set up an entity, you just own the rights to the future in China. Because it's a first-to-file environment like patents on trademarks in China. It's the same policy. So you go and you get all this stuff done. And then you build your company there. Like then you start doing sales and trading and distribution. You don't do it until you own it. Because otherwise it becomes a huge it's something you cannot solve. Like with some of my clients, I cannot fix, that one that I mentioned originally. We had to take that. They were like 177 in the category when we took over, and now they're like 17. But to me, I mean, yeah, that sounds great, right? We've increased things. It sounds awesome.
Right.
Except, why aren't they number one?
Yeah.
They invented the category, and
yes.
it's because they can't. They can't dominate their brand trade.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And really, it's a matter of doing it later is too late. So in other markets that might be okay, but you're absolutely correct about that in China, this trademark registration, and in other markets increasingly as well, is really a critical step that people don't really look at. They're looking more at the selling and the marketing. So talking about selling and marketing, you were talking about Taobao and Tmall, and I think most people see that as sort of the point of entry. And yet it's such a massive platform, as you've pointed out. It's bigger than most countries and fiercely competitive. Is that really the best point of entry for brands these days, or are there other strategies that you think are important?
So first of all, I wouldn't consider that the entry point, because to me, Tmall is a brand control unit of Alibaba. It was built for authorized commerce. Like Alibaba invented brand authorized commerce, right? They pioneered it, so to speak. So they created Taobao, and then within 2 years, there was so much trade going through Taobao. By 2008, every brand on earth had people in China saying they were their official Nike store or whatever it is, right? And so Alibaba was getting a lot of pressure from all the brands to create some legitimate channel so that consumers could see who actually is the brand, who's selling the real thing.
Right.
So they created authorized commerce, which, that model was copied by Amazon later in the form of Seller Central, where you have to go through a similar vetting process to get into the program, show your trademarks, et cetera, and so on. That whole thing was designed basically by Alibaba as a response to rampant IP infringement, right? Trademark infringement back in the mid 2000s, yeah? And then, it's now evolved into something even bigger. So what does that mean? Why am I telling you this? It means that Tmall is a second mover advantage market, right? So the idea is it is there that you as the brand owner, if you own the rights to the trademark that is being searched and sold on these platforms, then you can go in at any time, and provided you can prove that, you can register all that IP to the back end of your flagship, and automatically all the brand traffic goes to your store. So it's like a captive audience. You can recapture all the unauthorized revenue, or most of it, and I say a huge percentage of it, depending on your brand selling policies in China. There's a lot of complexity around structure. But let's assume you want to be the only one. With this status as a Tmall flagship, you are the only entity that has a right to all that traffic in Taobao, Tmall, and the other channels.
Wow.
So technically, you have brand rights. Therefore, once you've done the registrations, you're the only one who can open up, for example, Pinxiaobao, which is the brand traffic terminal, which allows you to do the banners. And so if you think of it as a phone screen with 50 square centimeters, like a big iPhone screen, the first third of the screen is reserved for the Tmall store owner. So if you type in a brand keyword, or someone recommends a brand on, in somewhere in the ecosystem, right? A KOL was mentioning a brand or whatever it is, automatically that when someone looks for that brand, they are taken to search results or pages that are dominated by these registered Tmall stores that have rights to that brand. And so they only see you. So you can basically dominate the first third of the real estate, and then the next third. And so you end up with about 2/3 of a phone screen. So all the valuable traffic on a brand is going to the Tmall store. They may not buy from you because you're too expensive and they buy from a dealer, but in the end, you will have a dominant position. And provided you're advertising and doing some promotion and working with the Tmall category management, you'll be the only ones that get invited into the events for the brand and all this. So you end up being able to dominate within a short period of time the trade that's available on your brand.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah. So what does that mean? It means you don't have to, entering China, when you say entry point, Tmall is a drain hole. It's like JD, okay? The nice thing about China, and the negative thing, is that there's in e-commerce, there's basically two big drain holes, right? There's the Alibaba ecosystem. That's one big bathtub. And there's another one, the Tencent ecosystem, another big bathtub. And within those two big bathtubs, Tmall and JD tend to be the two biggest drain holes. So you can go in there. Now, if let's say you're in beauty, you definitely want to have a red store or a red channel, and that automatically links into Tmall or Taobao, right? So you have cross-platform integration now. There's a few other channels you may want to consider, like Kuaishou. If you have low-priced products, you can definitely consider this channel if it's Agra. If you are doing something that's super dirt cheap, you don't care about brand, you can go into Pinduoduo and move huge volume, right? There's others and I think what Douyin, which is TikTok outside China, but Douyin is doing flagship model. So they've now launched commerce. How successful it's going to be, I don't know. But the two big drain holes, right? They control 90%, maybe 95%.
Wow.
End of the day, Alibaba bought its biggest competitor in cross borders, right? They invested in one of them, Red.
Right.
Integrated it. And then they bought Kaola. So essentially, and they bought May, which was flash selling, right? The biggest platform in flash. And now they've got Farfetch, right? So they basically just integrated, bought, or invested in as much as they can. And the same with Tencent, right? They own private commerce through WeChat. Right. They own, JD, etc. So you basically, as an entry point, it's not an entry point. It is an end game. It's the end point. It's the end. It's where the transaction takes place. So to enter the Chinese market, you don't launch Tmall. Tmall is a place that consumers go to transact. The most important thing to do when you're entering the market is to build a strong enough brand to compete there, period. So brand building can occur outside China and spill into China, which is how most brands get activated in the market. They later open a Tmall store, right? So guys like us that operate a lot of stores, when we're looking at a brand, the first thing my team does is go and look at the status of the brand in the ecosystem. We look for the right signals. We look for a lot of people talking positively about it in all the social digital channels where all the consumers move around and share information, and you get virality, right? So lots of speed and growth, okay? And then we look in the commerce channels like Taobao and JD and other places to see what the current transaction volume is indexed against the search and growth. So we're already looking to see how well known and how well liked, how likable the brand is before we take it.
Right. Yeah,
So
it makes sense.
So if a brand hasn't gone into China yet, that doesn't mean anything because most brands are activated in China, not being in China. So influencers in China follow influencers outside of China or travel and shop, or all the cross-border and overseas Chinese that are constantly trading and selling anything they can find that's good into their home market. They do all the work for you, really. As a brand, they can cover a huge thing. So if you're doing celebrity marketing, like a lot of brands in the UK do this really well. One in particular, they were just doing celebrity seeding, and they had a ton of fans of celebrities in the UK, even like, you know, the royal families wearing the jewelry, blah, blah, blah. Their first year launch on Tmall domestic, they did 30 million RMB. I've never even seen that.
Wow.
It's like, that's huge. This is a brand that didn't have a single staff member in China, right? This was just through their activation because the influencers in China love the influencers and the celebrities wearing the brand in the UK and US. So it just spills right in. And you can make that happy accident happen faster. So if you're a brand or a retailer with a true D2C, direct-to-consumer model, then you already speak the language and strategies that actually do this. And China's set up in a way. Yeah, and I would say China's already set up for you to win. You just have to understand a couple of things. One, it's way more competitive and can be more expensive to activate because you just have that much more competition, right? It's loud and crowded. And second, it can take more time than you think. So like, let's say you activate a brand in Canada. The consumer population is about the size of the city, greater Shanghai, right? Joe and Shanghai together have more population than all of Canada. So like if you activate a brand in the West, it's actually easier to activate a brand in the West that becomes popular in China than to go direct to China and try to activate the brand. Because you're up against a huge wall of competition in China, but you're not in, let's say, your home market like Canada.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, so in terms of best entry point, that question is loaded. And I wouldn't be doing a brand a service by saying, yeah, it's great, it's the best way to do it. No, it's not. It's the biggest drain hole. So if you've got a brand worth selling in China, it's the best place to be in most categories, but not in all. So I have clients who are in electronics and home goods and in spirits, beer and such, and in sports or sporting goods and professional athletic gear. And these clients do about 40 to 50% of their sales in JD. So whereas if you look at some of our fashion brands or you look at, you know, beauty, for example, that's like 90% Tmall, right? So you got to look at who the consumers are and where they are. So where are the fish swimming that are, you know, where are the fish swimming and eating and schooling and pooling that are buying your products? That is what matters, right? And for a lot of categories, it's Tmall. And for others, JD can be an excellent. And there are other platforms, right? If you're, like I mentioned before, if you have super low price product, you can go to a place like Pinduoduo and do liquidations and group buys. If you can go to Kuaishou and do live stream for markdown. I mean, and that's really like a tier 3, 4, and 5 customer base. Most brands are too focused on tier 1. Like they want to be in Shanghai, Beijing. They want to take a premium position. They want to do all this stuff. But in the end, so does everyone else.
Right.
So it's almost like you're better off, you know, thinking about where can you win and not worried about who you're trying to win over. Because maybe the best place to go is where you can win. And there's a different consumer. And then there's subcultures in China, right? It's a very complicated place. So, you know, there are, for example, there is a huge culture of motorcycle racers in China. And you think about it, you're like, what are you talking about, right? I mean, everywhere they have electric scooters and electric cars, but
Right.
actually, there's a huge population, and I mean, it's actually huge, bigger than my customers' population outside China, in China, buying their brand.
Wow.
And the volume it's enormous, and I'm always amazed that like Chinese will go onto the store. And the guy buys a Ducati to race or whatever, a BMW bike, and he goes and buys my client's gear, right? He'll pay 10,000 RMB for a uniform.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, full price retail right through Tmall or JD.
Jeez.
It amazes me. It happens all day long, and every time I look at the numbers on the brand, I'm like, how is this possible? But that's what China is. It's really complex. It's really big, and you've got to be extremely focused and strategic to make it work. Best example, you're not going to go tuna fishing with a cane pole and carp bait, right?
Right.
So if you're looking for tuna, you need a big boat, you need sonar, you need a lot of equipment and a lot of skill to catch a tuna. But there's nothing wrong with, going to a smaller pond and fishing for things you can see and catching, right? Because what do you really want? Do you want to catch a lot of tuna and spend all your time frustrated, or do you want to fill the boat with fish?
Right, right.
This is what I tell my clients. I mean, why don't you try to win a subcategory that you can win in, right? Because you're never going to win it all. It's just too hard. It's very competitive. So is this too high level, or do you want me to get even more specific on that?
I think what you're saying is really interesting. So how would you, in a market like China, target one of these sub-markets? In other words, if you're putting something on Tmall or JD, essentially that's a nationwide reach. So how would you enable that to focus specifically on one of these sub-markets?
So I think the way everything is, at least I can't speak for offline, right? I'm just talking about digital ecosystem.
Right.
It's actually quite easy to identify the groups of consumers, and you have access to all the demographics. So again, a big difference with working in the Tmall, or let's call it the Alibaba ecosystem, you are given access to data you can't get outside China. Merchants don't have privacy. It's a public marketplace in a real sense. Like, you can see what your competitor's store sales on individual items did yesterday. Like, I can look up the data.
Wow.
It's a naked beach. And that data on transactions, that point of sale data, is tied to demographics. So for us to run research and figure out how to do targeting is super easy, at least in Alibaba. You're given an insane amount of data and data access to allow you to focus your efforts on specific demographics and subsets of consumers. And then I would highly recommend to look at it a totally different way, which is not about targeting, which sounds very aggressive. It's really about community engagement, right? It's about building a community and really working with a specific community or a fan base or a group of consumers that identify themselves through their hobbies, passions, and beliefs. And that part is community marketing. And it's more powerful than all the other forms. So direct marketing is, the return rates are okay, but it's not nearly as profitable as getting brand marketing right or community marketing right. Or brand marketing in the form of influence. So influence marketing, so let's call them trusted personalities, because there's a lot of different kinds of China. So trusted personalities combined with official and trusted media combined with community resources tends to get the best outcome in terms of building a brand and having that durable brand equity last a long time in the market.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think that, these are very good points that a lot of us, even who've been, in Asia and working with Asia for a long time, probably haven't thought about. Some people probably have, but I think a lot of people might not have. So just one last question, and that is, when you're talking about brands that resonate with the Chinese consumer, so much of the focus has been on the luxury sector, which of course has the advantage, right, of being, very prestigious labels, very distinct designs. Where do other brands manage to differentiate themselves who are not in that luxury category?
So I think just people are obsessed with luxury because it's all about prestige and scarcity, right? It's about scarcity and exclusivity.
Right.
But that's only one marketing tool, right? That's like, hey, I'm going to launch a restaurant. Let's just use the velvet rope, right?
Yeah.
Make everyone wait outside. It's basically what you're saying. And yeah, there is a ton of focus on it, but it's irrelevant. Like 90% of my clients are not luxury brands, and they do super well in China. Super well. I mean, when you say, like what attributes the people, I mean, they're looking to be a part of something great, that means more than just something they can buy from a factory direct. So if you've got a brand that's like this, that is really well respected, in demand outside China, you can do super well inside China, right? Like that is the metric. So it's not about whether you have a luxury price or positioning. It's about how you make people feel in mass. So there has to be word of mouth around your brand. There has to be positive momentum around the products in the brand. And we work with clients that, let's say they're in the premium position, but they could be in beer, supplements, clothing, all this stuff, not luxury, and doing better than luxury brands in China. I mean, in terms of sales and throughput and margins. I have a client that we just launched. It's a relaunch because they've been in the market a bit, but they're relaunched with us. This brand is focused in one category of a performance apparel would be the best description of the apparel. They are not trading directly against Nike or Adidas or any of these big ones. They've got a real niche. They're doing super well globally. We launched in China. I mean, it's going through the roof, literally. I mean, it just overnight, because the brand means something and it's specialized in a category like certain things for runners or certain things for bikers or whatever.
Right.
And these categories are growing very fast because a lot of people are getting involved in different kinds of sport and the community around sport, not just soccer and basketball, but other sports,
Right.
and more like semi-athletic professional type sports. Like it could be like triathlons or things like this. And you see it all over China in every category. I mean, things are blowing up in winter sports, running, cycling, tennis. I mean, we deal with all these different categories with different clients, and I'm always amazed at the growth. It's insane. And it's really, it's all community marketing. So you have ambassadors, you have community, you've got influencers, and it's good enough, right? As long as you choose a good subset. I'll give you a great example. What do you consider Lululemon? Is that a luxury brand? I don't consider it a luxury brand.
No, I don't either. Yeah. Performance, right? Activewear or something.
Lululemon's, online presence in China is over 2 billion RMB in less than 5 years. Right?
Wow, you're kidding.
No, because they own yoga.
Right. Yes.
They own yoga apparel for women, and yoga completely took off in China in the last 10 years. I mean, that category just absolutely exploded. We're trying to win this new brand. It's they're focused in a different subset, right? They do gym apparel, and I think it's going to go through the roof. This brand is in particular doing well globally.
Wow.
But it's a no-brainer. So like they come into China, it's going to be easy for them. There's already a fan base in China, and they're a D2C brand, and they did it all right. They have complete control. They have the right culture. Their product is priced much less than Lululemon. It's a different form of apparel.
Right.
It's unisex as opposed to more like single sex. It's really, they've got a great positioning, and they've got the traction, and they've got the resources, and they can come in and do it right. And I think that's really the message. If a U.S. retailer, I wouldn't suggest taking a U.S. retail model into China. You're going to lose. But I would suggest looking at retail brands from the States and rethinking how you approach the Chinese market. So if you struggled before, is it because your brand is dead? Is it because you didn't resource it? Is it because you used an outdated strategy? Is it because you don't invest in marketing? I mean, I look at what commercial directors send to me all the time, right? Here's some BS P&L that I've made up out of my butt yesterday. I decided this is what we're going to do in China, and this is how much money we have to spend. Instead of doing it the other way. Who won in China? Who's winning? How did they win? Oh, how much did it cost to win? Oh, interesting. Do we have the resources to win in our own category? Oh, we don't? Great. Don't enter China.
Right.
But don't try to do it the other way, which is here's our model that we use everywhere else. I think it will break in China because China's redefined that entire space, especially digitally. The sort of, think of it as like a poker tournament. The ante now is very different than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you better be good at poker, right? Like,
yeah.
you can't be like an amateur. It's like someone who's never played tennis. You know, you're asking me, how do you come into China? Well, it's simple, right? Make sure you are at least decent at tennis before you get on the court with, 50 Andre Agassi's and 3 Roger Federers.
Right.
Make sure you've got something, or play a different sport. Like, don't go head on against people that are armed, trained, and ready for you, right? Like, the best thing is arm yourself first, get the right things in place, then come into the market, and you'll do so much better. And by the way, there are so many people like us that have been operating in China for a decade, have oodles of experience, worked with hundreds of brands, they've already done all this. Like, there's so much help available. Drop all the arrogance, be humble, be respectful, be patient, learn what you need to know, and retool internally, and you'll have a success in China eventually. Be patient. Like, I tell people that you can't predict when your water is going to boil in China. You really can't.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now every single commercial director has a magic P&L. And what is a magic P&L? It goes up a specific growth rate every year, exactly the same for 5 years. And it starts at a number no one can live with and goes to a number that no one can get to, right? So it's like it starts with stupid and ends with totally outrageous and unrealistic. And this is basically my life. I look at it and say, well, we've grown in, northern England at that rate. I'm like, dude, you don't even have something. I can copy your products in China in 24 hours.
Right.
And sell them for less with a better packaging and better service. Get out of here. You're not even in the game. So I think, recognize that doesn't work and focus on what does. So when you're trying to boil water, it takes time. You got to pay attention. I have clients that, like I mentioned, this one in performance apparel, we launched 2 weeks ago. On JD, we're up to like 80,000 a day. And Tmall just launched this week, and that's 40. And it's like, whoa, this is unbelievable. Like, we haven't even really done any marketing yet. That happens. 1 out of 5 brands, you get that.
Right.
But the vast majority have to take the time and money to do it right. And it's not such a bad thing. I had a client on the worst case. I'm embarrassed to admit this. We thought it would happen in the first year. 2 years, 9 months later, it happened.
Oh my gosh.
For 19 months we hated each other. Right?
Yeah, I can imagine.
My team overestimated. They're not wizards and magicians. It looked good.
Right.
It looked great. Like we did the research. We looked at everything. We thought, wow, some of their peers that launched, they all grew. And what it was there was this wave that we didn't know about where the platform gave special support for 90 days to a bunch of brands. And that gave them all a leg up. And so I didn't know that. I found out after the fact. It was like, how did these guys do it? We ended up trying to figure it out. And we ended up finding out the reason and then realized, oh, wow. So that basically the platform itself created a big trench, a big moat. And it took us 19 months longer than we expected. But the good news was last September, right after COVID, all of a sudden their water boiled and sales are up 6x.
Wow.
Literally month on month 6x. But literally we went through years of just misery,
Right, yeah.
Never give the client good news. Everyone's angry at each other. We're losing money. They're losing money. It's the most awful situation, but it happens. And that's the reality of China, is that it is not an ATM machine. If you put your card in, it works the opposite. Instead of money coming out, the machine keeps your card and you have to put another card in. And you're probably going to do that for a couple of years until the machine shoots out money, right? So it's going to take some time, it's not a cash machine. It's the opposite.
Right.
It's a long-term investment in arguably the biggest market in the world. And it's going to take time to get it right and figure things out. And that's what I tell people. Just resource things properly, have patience and humility, listen to people that work in the market every day, and listen to them. Do what they tell you to do. If your product isn't good quality, fix it. Don't put a plastic bag and a bow on it and repackage it. Fix the problem, because in China, it's very unforgiving. If you have a quality problem, people go online and they bash you. All of the reviews are public. You cannot get rid of them. Once they're on there, it's like a permanent stain. It's like a scarlet letter. And unless you try to bury them with fake orders or whatever, essentially you throw anchors off the back of the boat and you're dragging your anchor and you're shooting a hole in the bottom. I was on the phone with a client with a quality problem today, and that's why I'm bringing this up. I'm like, dude, you're asking us to win a regatta with a boat that leaks and has a hole in the bottom. I'm like, fix the quality. I mean, what is your problem with you guys? You're $1 billion business. You're a public company. You don't have a sourcing team that can source. It's a plastic product. I can do it myself in the next week. I mean, I make a phone call in Shenzhen. Someone will send me something better than what you make. I mean, come on. This is like China. You get this stuff done quick. And it's just, and I'm always amazed at how many things are in the way of a brand success. Most of them, and this is the shock, has nothing to do with China. It's all internal.
Oh my gosh.
It has nothing to do with China. China is China. China's not working against you. It's just a different dynamic ecosystem.
Right, yeah.
Once you know the rules, you know how to play the game, you know what's going to be required to win, put it in. If you don't, you're going to lose. So it's not like anyone can predict your outcomes. But what I tell people is, look, if you're in for long term and you really do have a defendable position and you have something worth selling and you invest in brand building, because that's the number one thing to do, and you do it long enough, you will win, because most people will give up and most people will not invest in their brand properly. They're always doing cheap, weird ways of writing P&Ls, and that is your advantage.
So true.
So someone who's investing 5% loses to someone who invests 20. It's simple. And the leadership position, in the words of Seth Godin, right? You can never invest enough in category leadership. You cannot invest enough in it. It is so undervalued and underrated. And in China, it's worth so much more. The category leaders own the business. How's this? More than 90% of sales is less than 10% of the stores.
Wow, that's really incredible.
That is the market. It's more like 95-5, right, in most categories. All the traffic is branded. It's dominated by the brands. They own 90 to 95% of the trade. And to give you an idea, only 1 in 20 stores ever does more than like €1 million a year. That's it. Between Taobao and Tmall, all 60 million stores, only 1 in 20 ever hits that stride and does more than $1 million. And I assure you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and and if I start going to 5 million, it drops precipitously. It's like 1 in 100, right? So you think the odds are really against you because there's more competition. So you have to be sure that when you go in, you are going to win your subcategory. You're going to place in the top 10. And so when my team looks at brands, we look at this. We say, can we take a leadership position in this category? Can we beat the competition? Do we have what it takes as a brand, as a resource? Because we can see what the competitors are doing. And if we think it's a solid yes in that, and they've got the traction, and they've got the resources, and they own their rights to market, we go for it. And it's successful more than 80% of the time, like 80 to 90%, 85%. Now, when you're missing some of those components, the success rate drops in half. Right?
Yeah.
Like 50% success. But, you got 50% odds in Vegas. Just go to Vegas. Play craps and poker, right? You got a better – blackjack is a 50-50 game, right? You have just as much of a winning chance.
Yeah.
So unless you can stack the deck where you feel that your odds of success are on the high side of, 70, 80%, I just wouldn't do it. If it's like a 50-50 shot, it's going to be painful all the way through. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think, you've made so many good points here. I've learned so much listening to you, Josh. Where can people find you? Where can they find your company?
That's easy. I am really accessible on LinkedIn, right? You can go to our website, kungfudata.com. It's exactly how it sounds, kungfudata.com. So anything about consumers, digital, social, marketing, commerce, structure, legal, all of the stuff you would need, we cover those topics throughout the year. You spend, like I said, be patient, humble, learn some stuff, see if China's for you. But, and that's the best way.
Well, Josh, thank you so much. Really appreciate your taking the time.
You got it. And it's a pleasure, Jane. And let me know if there's anything I can do in the future to help out.
Yeah, that's really great. If you enjoyed this episode of A Seat at the Table, join me each week when I sit down with leading executives, entrepreneurs, educators, and authors who share their insights, experiences, and future vision for business. And make sure to visit Spin Expo. From trend information to technical innovation, Spin Expo is the primary exhibition for yarns and knitwear. The fair provides well-edited forums featuring high-quality products that are bursting with creativity. To learn more, go to spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. You can also find a link in the show notes for this episode. Before you go, our current situation and sourcing reports are now available. Find out more in the show notes. And don't forget to check out our new podcast website, where you can find all the previous episodes of A Seat at the Table, plus show notes and lots of other useful information. You can find it at www.seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. FM because it's a podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in the next podcast episode.